Hello, everyone. This is Naomi with the Word Count here again with your creative writing needs. 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Lauren A.R. Masterson, also known as Little Alice, regarding her effort to maintain accuracy in her historical fiction novel, Geisha Hands. So today, as promised, I have here with me today Mark Anthony Tierno, a sci-fi and fantasy novelist with over 30 novels to his name, who's going to divulge some of his secrets to creating a realistic, fictionized world. Hi, Mark. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So before we look into your bag of tricks and steal a little bit of your genius, why don't you tell us a little bit about your writing journey so far? What inspired you to write? How did you get your start? Did the writing process get any easier for you 5 books in, 10 books in, 20 books in?
Well, my start, the more I try to think of, some people say, what age were you when you decided to be a writer? It was never a flat decision at one calendar date. It just kept evolving. It's like, okay, first I'd be the kid that, back in elementary school, they had like Tab or Lucky Books where you could order whatever books you wanted. I'd be the one walking back with the armful.
Me too.
And always had a great imagination. And then around 7th grade, every time I'd read something, I start taking notes in the back of my head going, I like the way he did this. So it just sort of evolved until it got to the point when I was about 14, I got real tired of all these cheap villains that would capture the good guy and explain his entire plot to them. I went, no, I want a bad guy that he doesn't waste time on that. He's either going to shoot you, or if you're alive, it's because he wants you alive for some nefarious reason. And I began evolving ideas for that in my head. I got into gaming like D&D and stuff, and my players weren't aware of the fact that I was using them as to basically work out my plot. And finally, it just got to the point where I'm going, this needs to be a book, this needs to be a movie, and I just began evolving how I was going to tell it over time, because I knew I had a really vast story. The first book is like 330,000 words. And I wanted to write that in a different way, so I began thinking up this, a quasi-poetic way of doing it. Like, for instance, opening line of chapter 1, anyone can say, lightning struck across the sky, that sort of thing, and that yeah. I came up with the line, distant crack of thunder, a pretender of events awaiting the eccentricities of mortals. And I thought, okay, that's an attention getter, and I sort of used that style sprinkled in, to try and add some flavor when I want people to focus in on something.
Could you repeat that line again for me a little bit slower?
Distant crack of thunder, a pretender of events awaiting the eccentricities of mortals.
Oh, yeah. See, now if I read that on page 1, book is bought instantly.
Yeah, it's sort of like partial poetic Shakespearean thing. And the minute I thought of that line, that defined a style for me. And I save it just for specific instances, because you have too much of that, it might go the other way. So that's my attention getter line. And I just began evolving after that. Then it came down to drawing the maps and all the whole process of creating the world of Maulding.
Right, and the Maulding series, if I recall correctly, is 13 books in length?
13 books. The first one is out as Maulding Volume 1 and 2, because on my first, and I use this in quotes, publisher, they said, oh, we got to split it. And I'm going, but it's written to be one. And now that I gained control about it, to avoid any confusion, too late, I had to include that in there in case so people don't accidentally repeat buy.
Right.
But that said, 13 books. The first one is 330,000 words. There's only one book shorter. Most of them average 375. And the longest, the big climax, book 13, is 575,000 words.
Mm.
I looked up, that's 8,000 shy of War and Peace, except mine's a lot more eventful. So it's a big story. It's got like 250 characters by the time everything's said and done. takes place on several planets, several continents, spans thousands of years of time and dimensions.
Wow, okay. What would you say is like, I know it's kind of hard to pick a through line between 13 books, but if there was one, main message you would want your readers to get from the series, what would that be?
Gee, there's a few messages that sort of snuck their way in there. That I believe it has to be plot first. If you have a message to squeeze in, make sure you do it within the plot. Any book that goes by, well, it's a message book and no plot, they're never going to get the message because no one's going to be interested in it.
Right.
But it comes down to your basic good versus evil. But there was one point in the series when it's basically religious chaos. All the evil gods and the good gods are fighting each other, and the poor mortals in between are just get trapped between them. They go, we don't want either one of you. And it gets into a bit of religious extremism. And I thought, there's some parallels to the current reality there. Just a little bit of nip and tuck here in the wording, and I can squeeze that in there without sacrificing plot. So that would be one message in there. There's also, especially in the first book, the characters, including some that shouldn't entirely get along, they get to do the impossible because they cooperate as a group because of friendship and all this other stuff. So I'm sure there's other messages that some literary class guy is going to analyze, that I hadn't consciously intended, and I'll just nod and act like I'm wise and everything. But when you're writing a realistic world with everything in it, that's going to happen. If you're trying to write life into a book, there's going to be things like that just sort of sneak their way in, because that's life.
Right, and sometimes those are the best parts. All right, for you guys out there that are itching to read Mark's series, I will have a link in the description below. I do also want to note, Mark already touched base on this a little bit, but that his series actually takes place over a span of a few different planets over thousands of years. Now, Mark, you have a master's degree in physics, correct?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but when I was in college, the sciences and the humanities were presented as like these polar opposite entities. One was fanciful and fun, and the other one was practical and logical. And they made it seem like the two could not be intertwined. You were either a crazy, starving artist, or you were a business person. Those were really your only two options. But you're living proof that these two fields can actually be intermingled and be intermingled successfully. So how does your degree fit into your writing, or how has it fit into your writing so far?
Well, in some cases it means, A, I don't have to look things up because I know the actual science behind it. I know how to extrapolate that science for other bizarre settings. And that's what a training engenders, a certain mindset where I can apply that same sort of scientific thinking and logic to something like, okay, how is magic going to work and stay consistent? Basic inventing my own physics for the rules of magic and whatever else happens along there. So I do definitely mix the two together, and again, it saves time because I don't have to look things up or ask somebody's advice of how would this work, do you think? Because
you're like, I know. Now, you mentioned magic, and that reminds me of this novel I actually just finished reading. The title, it's the Book of Atrix Wolf, and it's where magic is presented in this traditional sense with like conjuring and spirits and things like that. But it also acted as a gateway between like two worlds, where at points these two worlds are interconnected, and it honestly got really confusing to follow when you attach it to the plot. So I wondered how you managed to maintain that logic when you're working with a concept where pretty much the only rule is that there aren't any rules.
Well, first I have different styles of magic. And I'm part of this. I also design my own game system. And so I already had the source material ahead of time I had my game system that had like 19 different casting classes and a spell book that's about an inch thick and everything else. So as I'm writing the books, I went, well, I can draw from this. So I have like this style of magic that deals in the elements, you know, air, earth, fire, water. There's a style of magic that deals in time and space. There's another style of magic that deals in conjurations, things like that. Which means all wizards are not created equal. Some of them will be, but it's like all scientists aren't created equal. Each has their own specialty.
I like that.
So, and that gives each of the wizards a different personality. I even have one of my characters, it's come up a few times, Sabu, where he's going, I'm not a temporal mage, which is another type of wizard, and my way of introducing the fact that these exist and you'll be seeing one sometime down the line.
Interesting. So you had to create, I mean, more than just your own world. You really kind of created your own reality.
Yeah.
And just hearing you describe it, it sounds like a really tall order. And I mean, if you enjoy it, that's fine. But it seems like it could be a bit intimidating when you're trying to embark on that for the first time. So what was like the first step that you went through to kind of help you start this process?
Well, there were two. Like I said, I got into gaming, like D&D, and on my second session, I just began rewriting it. And that ended up with my whole full-blown game system, which became helpful in writing later on. But for the world itself, I just started with the basics. I went, okay, where's some graph paper, you know, about this 2-foot sheet, and I just began drawing. I began drawing at first random things here and there, and then different places that, oh, this sounds like a cool place. Like I came up with, there's a place called the Sea of 1,000 Islands.
The Sea of 1,000 Islands?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which sounds great and was inspired by dressing. Because as a kid, there'd be, you know, commercial for 7 Seas, 1,000 Island dressing, and I'd be going, Mommy, where's 1,000 Islands located? So I put them down. Another little oddity from the back of my mind until I had this humongous world, because I wanted it big enough so I could have some high-tech area here and some Aborigines here, and the world's so big no one knows that there are others there. After the world, then I began tinkering with, you know, thoughts of, well, what's wrong with getting my own language? I mean, English is a mess. It has the exception to every single rule, and I just wanted a nice, simple phonetic language. So I sat down one day with a friend, and we just began drawing up characters for the alphabet. I tweaked those. I now have them on a file on my website. And I added a dictionary, which I would keep adding to over the years as I was actually working on the books. And the theme of this dictionary was different meaning is a different word. So there's no word with like several different meanings. Like there's,
I love that simplicity.
There's like 3 different words for death. Death of body, death of soul, and the great death, which is also the name of one of the olden gods of old. There's like a couple different words for strength, three or four different words for, you know, friendship, depending on the type, and on like that. And occasionally I'll sprinkle those in along the text of what the characters are saying to add some flavor. I came up with, okay, like my own time scale, how they tell time instead of minutes, hours, days, etc. I defined how long a year was and what I would call a year. I didn't just want to call it a year. That sounds too earthy, and you could get confused with how long an earth year is. So I came up with the term rel. You know, it's not a year, it's a rel, and a rel is 3.6 earth years. And instead of seconds, there's a thing called a tid, which in the context, it sort of sounds like that, because you can go, hey, wait a tid, and it sounds like, wait a sec.
Right, so there's still that connection where your readers will understand without getting confused.
I tried, especially in the first couple of books, I tried to have a certain context thing until they got used to the way things were going on. Like, if the way somebody addresses someone, you can tell that nonsense word I came up with is some sort of cuss word.
Right.
And then after that, over time, I just began adding more and more details, like, okay, the Maulding sun is blue. And so therefore, as it would shift through the upper atmosphere, here's the physics part of me again, it would actually shift a little bit into the ultraviolet, the way our yellow sun we see as like white in the sky. which means you're growing up under ultraviolet light, so there'd be a couple additional colors that the natives can see that we can't. So I came up with 4 additional colors, you know, just to have those sprinkled throughout. And one of the appendices in the first book is there's a color chart. Here's the Earth visual spectrum, here's the Maldives visual spectrum, and where the added colors fit in.
That is phenomenal to me. It's like way over my head, and I love it.
I get dangerous when I get bored. That's what it amounts to. I got some free time, let's stand up something else.
So how long did it take you to kind of come up with everything? I mean, I'm assuming to a certain extent it was in progress as you were writing, but.
Yeah. Well, between the time I did the map and actually realized, okay, I have time to actually write this thing, because I did the map when I was 19. I was still going to school and stuff and taking care of parents. Finally got to write. There's Eaton Canyon fire. My grandpa and my mom said had died years before, but my mom never sold the house, and that house burned down. We got insurance money. Things were a little bit less poverty stricken, so I went, okay, I have time to now write the book. And that was about 15 years after I did the first map. So I had that long to get the plot going and kept adding things to my world. I got my world book here. These are all my typed up notes of all the different aspects of the world, culture, whatever hidden societies there are around, just everything I threw in there as I came along. And occasionally the appendices in the back of each book I actually draw from that. So I'll have the updated dictionary in there. I'll have, in the case of book 11, I actually have the Maulding Tarot in there because one of the characters is a soothsayer and she has her tarot cards and everything. So I went, okay, here's how to read the Maulding Tarot. And just an increasing amount of detail like that, you know, just, you know, because I'm a born geek, so I start adding in geeky stuff.
I love it. The geek's coming out of me just talking to you every second. I'm like, So you obviously put a lot of effort into this, a lot of time, a lot of just energy. So what tips would you give to any of our listeners that are looking to undergo this process, like starting out?
Start with the basics. The basic is first an idea. What sort of world do you want? What type of story are you going to tell in it? You don't have to have the entire plot ready on day one, but just some basic idea like that. And then maps help. You know, there's plenty of books where I have a map of the sector of the world in the back. I mapped up the entire world just because I was always wondering what was beyond that given coastline. So you can wrap my map around a globe. Not saying you have to be that detailed, but start with the maps. The maps, depending on what you come up with, will probably inspire an idea for some plot elements. You know, after you start naming things or whatever, and went, oh, this would be a good place for a desert. I got to have a scene with a desert in there, or some desert people. Let's add up some desert people. So after have the maps, just begin adding cultural notes. Some of, you know, at first, just whatever you need to get the book started. And I guarantee you, as you go along, you will keep adding stuff. Like on the second book, Mysteries of Old, there's a desert kid. They finally take him back to his people, and I thought, great opportunity! I get to come up with a whole new culture. And so I got to add more notes along there. So the basics, come up with your basic idea of the world, start up maps, and just whatever notes to your world and the culture. You know, it can be random stuff at first. Eventually, you will form a pattern. You know, but you know, it's like on my language. That was just pretty much random words at first, until I began seeing, okay, I can form a pattern here. What the Maulding style of language looks like. You can do that same thing with the world that you're writing in.
Right. So in other words, it's, you know, it's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 2 months. It's like an ongoing process. So certainly not for the faint of heart. It's just not something that can be rushed.
No, it's a process. It's a long-term labor of love. You do it because you go, there's a thing inside your head that won't rest until you get it down. And you know, ideally, if you're to the, you should be to the point where you're going, oh good, tomorrow's Monday, I get to work in the book again. You know, no one in the right mind looks forward to Mondays except a guy with a passion. If you don't have that passion there, and you know, then get a job as a plumber or something. But you need to have that passion and that goal, and that's what drives it, because this is a long-term process. If you're expecting, okay, I'll start the book on Monday, in 1 month I'll have it finished, and then I'll be a famous writer in 3 months. Not going to happen. You know, even the best of books may actually take a while.
I hear a lot of that. And I'm like, it must be so disheartening when you're like, oh, I'm going to be famous as soon as I publish. And then you're waiting and you're waiting and you're like, I'm not famous yet. What is going on?
Yeah, initially when I was at the stage of sending stuff out to agents, between emailing them letters and a couple phone calls, I contacted about 150 agents, heard back from 12 of them.
Mm.
Most of them went, oh, you're new, we don't handle new people, or oh, you're fantasy, that's a specialty. And I was new and fantasy.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah, there's like a couple that responded, one of which I had him on for a few months, and I heard afterwards he hadn't gotten anybody published in 5 years. And he was sending, it's like, his feedback would be this little tiny slip of paper going, okay, here's the publisher, the names of the publishers I've sent stuff to. No other verification. And one of them was like HarperCollins. You know, they do romance novels. This is a fantasy book. So, you know, he was kind of inept. Another one was an author turned agent that seemed more concerned about his own stuff than the people he's representing. So I went, no thanks. And the contract looked a little bit, he wanted a piece of whatever pie I had in the future as well.
Ah.
So I went through a lot of that. Now I'm sort of doing it on my own. I do have this one agency whose main purpose is to try to get me hooked in with selling me to other publishers or agents.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
they supply me with, I get the hardcover books and everything else I can show around and get a few sales, but their main, and they admit, you know, their main specialty is we try to get it sold to the big guys, you know, which is what I would like. I would love to shove it over to some big name publisher going, you worry about this, I'm getting back to writing, because that's what I do best.
And that's got to be a wonderful relief after all of the struggles you've gone through prior. It's like, oh, I just have to worry about writing? Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Yeah, that's all I want. It's like I ghostwrite, you know, to pay the bills, but I want to get back to my stuff now. I was able to get a lot of writing done in the past because, again, I was helping my mom with my Parkinson's, or with my dad's Parkinson's, and that was pretty much my job. You know, 24/7. The fact I was here writing, my parents are going, okay, he's going to be here. My mom can leave the house once in a while, and they're also going, our son's a writer. All right, you know, and so that brought up the tone level and everything. But then after I lost both parents, of course, I went, well, I don't have my patron anymore, and you know, let's see about ghostwriting. That's how I've been surviving on that. But I really want to get back to my own stuff.
Of course. That's where your heart is.
Yeah.
All right. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share? I know we kind of went pretty in depth with your process.
One, turn off the grammar checker. People don't talk perfect English. You know, you have to write somebody the way a real person's going to talk. If you're in doubt, sound it out, you know, in the character's voice. I actually, on my website, have a list of my top 10 writing tips, which means, of course, there's an 11th tip, because the 11th tip is a great one-liner I came up with. They say that a picture's worth 1,000 words. My advice to be a great writer is to make one word worth 1,000 pictures.
Ooh, I'm gonna steal that. I'll credit it to you, of course, but I'm totally gonna use that.
and a perfect example, I could say a day at the beach. That conjures up a whole lot of images of what's at the beach.
Right.
If I say the beach 1890s, then you see the guys with the striped long john bathing suits and the tent they have to change in and all that other stuff. So the idea is to say as much in your few words to conjure up the most amount of pictures. And that's what that is. You want one word to be worth 1,000 pictures.
Right. I like that. I really like that. All right, guys, Mark had mentioned his website a couple of times. I do have that link, and it will be below this video as well. Mark, I know you are probably inundated with work, so I want to thank you again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak with me.
No problem.
Did you want to show a few copies of your book?
Go to, we'll just throw www there and a .com there, and you got the website. It's now available in hardcover, paperback, and ebook, and the first sequel to that is out in ebook as well.
Oh, that
and
baby is
website. You'll find links to a couple of my Inspector Flatfoot stories, which are another piece of madness. Those are things I write in between the big jobs.
Okay, and you said those were novellas, short stories to novella in length?
The Inspector Flatfoot stories, the shortest one is about 6,000 words. The longest is like about 100,000 words. So for me, that's a short story.
Well, I mean,
is this, and this is not the longest book in the series. But if every story has its perfect length. For some stories, the perfect length is a short story. For others, it's something like that.
I know a lot of people that get intimidated by books that are really thick, but honestly, I see that book and I'm like, that looks like fun. That looks like 3 uninterrupted days of just reading, and I wish I could get back to that day. I wish I could get back to that time.
I've had a friend lose a weekend. The first time he went, okay, I'll read your manuscript. Stop bugging me about it. And he started on a Friday. And I got a couple of reactions from him. When he finished chapter 4, he's going, this is pretty good. He got to chapter 10, my next phone call I get from him, okay, you didn't tell me you could write. And then after that, he went, okay, I just blew out the entire weekend. I didn't sleep. Thank you much. It was great. But he read all the way through, day and night. He couldn't put it down. I went, well, thanks. And he's since become my beta reader. He's read all the books like about a dozen times each, and he can practically speak Maldives.
That's awesome. See, that's the type of feedback that I think every author would love to have. So yeah. I want to take this moment to remind my viewers here that reviews are important. It doesn't matter if they're favorable or not. Any kind of feedback is supporting authors, and we love to get that. Do we not, Mark? As long
as you just word it carefully, because a lot of authors like me, the self-confidence is a little bit on the edge. If you start wording it, it's like, oh, this is so bad, you got it. It's like I turn off. But if you go, hey, it's good. There's some parts here that need adjusting. Okay, fine. I had one guy, he bumped into me on MySpace. He was actually a copy editor and author for about 40 years. And he said, okay, there's some problems here and there, but I love it. And so I made a deal with him going, I can't pay you anything, but if you would mind just give me the feedback on some of the novels. So he began giving me, he'd highlight it in red, and that taught me a few things there. It was very constructive feedback, and he turned into a fanboy. I was getting feedback from him. Oh, I love this scene. This is the most bloody, disgusting scene I've ever seen. And what happens next to this character? Oh, no, don't tell me. And he's like a 40-year veteran of the industry. So I'm like, okay, great. So anytime I'm having confidence issues, I just think back to that guy, because he'd never seen anything about me before, didn't know any of my background, and he's a pro. And so I think back to that one going, okay, keep holding the faith, because there are people out there.
Yeah, that enjoy your work, which is fantastic. All right, guys, I do have all of Mark's social medias as well. Which is the best to reach you on? I know you have LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Which do you prefer?
Maulding.com, my website, is linked to everything else. So it's probably about the easiest there. I have the contact thing there and everything else. I have all the links to my Facebook and other social media that I don't always check in at. But Maulding.com is my central command, so that's probably the easiest way.
All right, so for all of you who want to connect with Mark, learn more about him, and learn more about his work, visit his website, which I'll again have below the video. Thank you again for tuning in. I want to be sure that you guys check out our website next Sunday for our next creative writing tip. That's all I have for you guys today. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks. It's been fun.